Hi, everyone. I'm Insiya. I'm the founder and CEO of Shellworks. And at Shellworks, we make a material called Vivamer, a genuine alternative to plastic. Today, I chose not to do a traditional pitch, if that's OK, but instead tell you a little bit about where we came from, how we did that, where we're going, and then also how all of you as individuals could help us solve the plastic pollution problem. So to kick us off, Shellworks didn't start in a very traditional sense. For example, we didn't start in a lab, we started in a shed, in Wales, actually. And in this shed, we did probably 200 different experiments every single day, with no heating, pretty low stakes. We were pretty broke at the time. We were all art students. And then shortly after that, because we were so broke, we would go to scrap yards. We would get aluminum, actually, and then we would melt it down and make our molds to make all of our products. When we needed to do a trial, we would go under the guise of being like really big corporate people to buy machines, to get them to run our material on their machines without them realizing that we couldn't actually do anything yet. It was kind of chaotic, but honestly, it was probably really beautiful at the time. And the reason for that is that it informed our entire R&D strategy. So constraints are our R&D strategy. We don't believe in excess resources, and every limitation forces creativity to us. And the result really is quite magical. It is a material that behaves like a plastic. So I've got a little bottle here. Looks pretty much like a plastic, I would bet. You guys can check it out after. But the beauty of it is that when you discard of it into any natural environment, it'll get eaten by nature and consumed, and it'll start to break down. And this is actually just a couple weeks from my backyard compost. So you're probably wondering how it works, and I've got a little video that explains it pretty well.
This isn't plastic. This is Vivamer. What is Vivamer? Vivamer is a biomaterial made by fermenting soil microbes, kind of like making kombucha. We melt it into spaghetti, chop them into pellets, and feed those pellets into machines that would otherwise make plastic products. So yeah, we are directly replacing plastic. Vivamer is home compostable. When it's thrown away, it breaks down in soil just like a banana peel. It's as if nature finally got tired of us humans polluting everything and handed us a better, healthier version of plastic. What can it be used for? Well, pretty much anything. Right now here at Shellworks, we make bottles, jars, pipette droppers, all kinds of packaging. But really, we can make almost anything out of Vivamer. Got an idea? Shoot us a message and let's work together on a cooler, plastic-free future.
So there are two things that often people get quite excited about. So one of them is the duality of something that's so stable, but then can degrade in any environment. So a cup can be a cup that you can drink from, but then when you throw it away, it's eaten. The second is the durability. So if you ever wanted to, you could put it in your washing machine, your dishwasher, your shower, and it would be totally fine. And often this leads us to a lot of skepticism because it honestly sounds a little bit like it's too good to be true. So maybe I could debunk some of the myths that people always raise to us. So first and foremost, this does not contain any petrochemicals, right? So there's no microplastics, there's no forever chemicals, no BPAs, phthalates, PFAs, all the usual stuff you find in plastics. So you don't get those negative effects. More so, it doesn't actually use your traditional biopolymer blending, so PLA, PBAT. People are familiar, that's the traditional science. That's not what we do. We don't have a higher life cycle footprint. It's something we get all the time. It's like, surely that's the catch. Or perhaps then, if you can't do that, you're contaminating recycling systems. And we don't do that either. It's also not too expensive. It's the same price at about 5 million units as paper, as glass, as aluminum. I figure that's pretty damn good for these materials that have been around for decades. And honestly, this is not lab scale. And that's because it's not plastic. It's Vivamer. And in the last year, we shipped 110 tons of this material in 4 million units. So we're scaling and growing quite rapidly. And then I guess the question comes down to how, right? How did we manage to do this in such a short period of time? Because we've only been operating for the last 5 years. And I could tell you about all the incredible people in my team and their PhDs and the backgrounds, but really it comes down to the trait and the I guess, the experiences that we had, and I wanted to share one story. It started very early, probably three and a half years ago now. It was our first customer order. We wanted to make these perfume caps for a brand called Saint Jardin. And we really iterated on our technology to be able to make something like this. Really polished. We were super excited. We were going to make these caps. We set up our pilot line. Everything was ready to go. Me and Amir, my co-founder, we were going to come in on the weekend to get a head start because we needed all the time we could get. And then we got a call at 6 a.m. saying, hey, there's been a fire, you've lost everything. And so this is what our facility looked like that Saturday morning. And I think it kind of talks about the traits that you need to have as a founder to build this kind of company, is that all we did was we got into white bunny suits, we cleaned down all the equipment, we scoured for the parts that we needed for the production run, we called every single machine manufacturer we knew in the country, we managed to make the parts, we had to hand clean 5,000 of them because clearly they weren't that good quality, and then we packaged them and we got them to the customer only 4 weeks later. And the reason why it's such a compelling story is because it taught us that we talk a lot about resilience being required in founders, but for us, resilience wasn't just about not breaking. Resilience is also in these moments that seem kind of untenable of how do you use that as an opportunity, because the reality was that it forced us to outsource everything, and now we're leaner and faster than any other company in our space. And I think taking on plastic is often not for the weak-hearted. I don't necessarily recommend it as something to dedicate your life to, but it is more important than ever. If we look at this industry, we aren't necessarily innovating at the same rate that we need to be able to take these challenges. And when we started, we were a really small team, and we were the only ones doing it. But now we have a groom or a network of supporters. So Pamela Anderson, of all people, she was like, hell yeah, I'm going to make a brand just to use your packaging and promote your solution. We've now gotten working with Unilever, one of the biggest giants in the world. And so we're proving that something that used to seem impossible is actually inevitable. And the reason that I came to Slush was actually to get support in changing the narrative. Because if you look at what people tell you, they'll tell you you can't use plastics because there is no technology out there. The cost isn't right. You haven't been able to scale the solution. You can't fit into existing infrastructure. And we've proved all of those things wrong. But the reality right now is that this entire industry that we're working with, they're stuck in the same ways. They're stuck in a status quo. Every company, if you look at their targets, they're centered around recycling. I find it fascinating. We're at a conference where most companies are going to be pitching about AI, disruption, technology. We're so used to that. But in this industry, it's not about that. It's about how can we stay and use the same systems that we've used for so long. Even though for the last decade, recycling has not worked, right? 9% of all our petrochemicals are recycled. What happens to the 91%? Some people don't like that stat, but if you really dig deep into it, in the US, PET, the material that is the most widely recycled, only 15% of that is recycled. So what is happening to the 85%? No one talks about that. We think it's the biggest marketing story ever, recycling. It's the best way for petrochemicals to do what they're currently doing. But where it really ends up is landfill, right? It ends up in incineration centers that emit toxic VOCs. And then fundamentally, it ends up in the environments we care about the most, like our oceans. And plastic pollution is only rising. And we can't recycle our way out of this mess. And we need to innovate in different ways. So my call to action from everyone in this room is, if you're a founder, if you're an investor, if you're a brand, if you know a brand, help us solve the actual problem and end waste, rather than doing something that is just honestly slightly less bad. Because that's what we're promising the future right now. So yeah, I guess to close this off, what I'd love to say is, nature doesn't innovate using the most amount of resources. I frankly don't think the people with the most amount of resources are going to solve this problem. It's innovators like ourselves who have to work within this extreme amount of constraints. But if nature can do it, so can we. Thank you.